We'll get started in about 1 minute, just in case anybody's having technical difficulties. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. So hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to my virtual seminar, Selling Your Home, where we're going to talk about everything you need to know to sell a house in today's market. Before we really get into the nitty gritty, let me introduce myself. My name is Jody Delansky, and I work for Zuber Realty. Zuber Realty is the largest independently owned brokerage in the area. We have offices in Boyertown, Pottstown, and Royersford, and a smaller satellite office up in Morgantown. Also, just to brag for a second, this year we've won the Pottstown Mercury's Reader Choice Award for 2020. This is not the first time we've won this award. We get this pretty frequently. I've lost count now of how many times we won it. So in general, people really love to work with us, and we really love to work with people. Diving into our content now, I want to just start by talking a little bit about today's market. And if you are thinking about selling your home and you've spoken to really anybody about it, you've probably heard the term that today's market is a seller's market. You may have even been encouraged to sell your house by maybe your family or friends. That's because it is a seller's market right now. And what that means is there's low inventory, so not a lot of houses for sale. But we still have a good demand of buyers just because interest rates are so low. I'm going to show you a graph of that in just 1 minute. So it's a seller's market right now, which means for you as a seller, it is a great time to sell. If you're thinking about selling over the next maybe year, 2, even 3 years, do it now. Do it now because the market could change at any time and you might not get as much for your house if you wait. I did a little bit of research. This chart I got from Bright MLS. This is data from the month of July 2020, so just last month, and I used the school districts listed on the screen for my analysis of Boyertown and all the surrounding areas. As you can see, overwhelmingly, the majority of houses that sold in July sold in under 30 days. And what that means is they had a good offer and they went under contract within 30 days. Of those that went under contract under a month, 100.66% of them were for asking price or over. That 0.66 is because some people will offer over asking price. So after that, the numbers go down significantly. So overwhelmingly, most houses are selling really quickly in under a month and getting asking price or over asking price. You can see even at the bottom of the chart, houses that are on the market for 181 days are still getting 90% of their asking price. So this is not a market where a buyer really has room to come in and lowball you and try to negotiate. In this market, you are in charge. Buyers are still out there though, because like I mentioned, interest rates are at an all-time low. So this is probably the past 50 years. Right now they're down right around 3% on average. So if you also have to buy a house, not the worst time to buy. When it comes to buyer financing, I will say that most buyers are going to require some sort of financing or some sort of mortgage. The majority of offers you get will have a mortgage contingency in them. Now, in today's market, you may be more likely to get a cash offer just because it is so competitive. But as you can see on the chart, in July, this same time period that this information is from, most people got a conventional mortgage. And we're going to talk in the next slide about the differences between the different types of mortgages. The best type of buyer financing for you is cash. Now, not a lot of people are offering it now, probably more so than in other times of the market. Cash is really, really good for you, the seller, because one, you don't have to depend on that buyer's mortgage going through. The deal is less likely to fall through just because you don't have to jump through the hoops of getting a mortgage. Two, you can have a really quick closing. it still would probably be around 2 weeks, just because you need some time to, get your stuff in order. Maybe you need to pack up and move. The buyer needs to order their title and homeowners insurance at the very least. So you still need about 2 weeks just to get everything in order. 3, when a buyer pays cash, sometimes there's no appraisal. So since there's no mortgage company involved, they don't send an appraiser out. Unless the agreement of sale contains an appraisal contingency, then you do have to worry about an appraisal. Conventional loan, the loan that the majority of buyers are using today, isn't the worst thing. It's probably the best kind of loan for you as a seller. This will be a closing in about 30 days, so a month after you're under contract, and they will send an appraiser out, but they're more lenient on repairs, and they don't have as specific guidelines as some of the other types of loans do. If you get an offer and the buyer is getting an FHA or USDA mortgage, that's probably your worst case scenario when it comes to financing. It's a longer closing time, so you're looking at 45 to 60 days until settlement. Also, their appraisers are more picky. So the appraisers will call out things mostly relating to safety. Like if they see chipped paint, they might make you scrape it and repaint it because they don't want to risk exposing people to lead-based paint. In this area, a lot of houses were built with the septic and the well in pretty close proximity to each other. FHA guidelines say they have to be a certain distance apart, right? Another one would be railings. If you have a porch or a cement slab outside your house, that's a certain distance off the ground. They might make you put a railing there, or if you don't have a railing going down to your basement. So if you get a FHA or USDA appraisal, I wouldn't be surprised if they do call out some repairs. There are more certain guidelines, like the distance between the well and the septic, but also be careful. Even if a buyer is doing a conventional loan, they can opt to be in certain programs, like a first-time home buyer program called PHFA. And sometimes when you add those additional programs, you now have to go by those guidelines of the government-backed programs, FHA and USDA. So just be sure that as you go over offers with your realtor, you keep in mind the financing that the buyer is offering. Another important thing is to think about, how is the buyer coming up with the money that they need to pay at settlement? Because they're going to have a big chunk of money due at settlement. You want to make sure, they're employed, they have something in the bank, and they're actually going to be able to come to settlement and pay all that money, or else your deal's going to fall through anyway. So one thing that I get asked a lot, understandably so, is how much does it cost to sell my house? You know you're going to get some proceeds, but you also know that the process costs a little bit of money. So we're going to break that down now. You start with your purchase price, right? And from there we subtract a bunch of things, and then you leave with your net profit. So the things that we subtract, number one is the seller's assist. And this is when the buyer asks the seller to cover some of their closing costs. So a buyer, this happens a lot even with like first-time home buyers or people that just don't have a lot of money in their bank. Their closing costs might be, let's say, $15,000. They only have $10,000 in the bank. So they're going to ask for a $5,000, maybe $6,000 seller assist from you, the seller, so they can cover those closing costs to kind of push the deal through. These were a lot more common before COVID, before we were in this competitive of a market. It was still a seller's market back then, but it wasn't quite as competitive as it is now. So now, if you're getting multiple offers, you may not see a seller's assist. You might but probably they won't all have a seller's assist. So you probably won't see it as much right now, but in case you do, you know what it is. Closing fees are little fees from, either the real estate company you're working with, or costs for transfer tax. Transfer tax is 2% in Pennsylvania. Seller pays 1% and the buyer pays 1%. Also the cost to get tax certifications, little small fees that add up. So you're paying for closing fees. You're also going to pay off any of your payoffs. So if you have a mortgage on your house, if you have any judgments or liens against your house, you're going to have to clear those out, back taxes, etc., before you can sell. And the last thing you're going to pay for is your realtor's commission. After you get all that out of the way, you get your net profit. So let's look at an example. Let's say your house sells for $200,000. you were a nice seller and let your buyer get a seller's assist of $6,000, which is a 3% seller's assist. Just to let you know, on a conventional loan, buyers can get up to 3% seller's assist, and on an FHA or USDA loan, they can get up to 6%. Your closing fees would be around $2,500. Your mortgage payoff, because you paid off some of your mortgage, but you still have a bunch left to pay. Let's say that subtracts another $120,000. And then you have your realtor's commission. I can't speak for any other brokerages or realtors, but I know if I would come out today to sign up your listing, I would ask for a 6% commission, which would equal $12,000. While we're on the topic, I want to talk about commission just for a second, because that $12,000 doesn't go directly into my pocket. I actually split that with the buyer's agent. So as a seller, when you pay that commission, you're paying the commission for your agent, me, and whatever agent is representing the buyer. From there, the buyer splits it with their brokerage, and I split it with my brokerage, and each brokerage and agent has a different kind of split schedule depending on their own arrangements. So it might sound like a lot you're paying, but really once it gets to be a lot, and remember that it is negotiable. So after you cover all your costs, you're left with $59,500. And this is after everything is said and done. So you will go to the settlement table, hand over the keys, say good luck to the new buyer, and walk away with a check for $59,000 to do whatever you want with. So that's really nice. You get that check and you don't have to go pay anybody off or worry about any other fees. It's all done. Now we're going to get into pricing, which is probably the biggest concern for a seller. And probably the mistake most made by sellers. Pricing is huge, more so than the color of your carpets or the stain on your wall or even who your realtor is. Honestly, the thing that's going to sell your house the most is how you price it. Price sells a house. So let's start with some of the pitfalls of overpricing, right? If you overprice, you're going to have something that's on the market for a long time. Buyers are going to see it because remember, buyers are looking at all sorts of houses. They're working with a buyer's agent who knows about the market. So if they don't see, oh, that looks a little overpriced, their agent is going to see that looks a little overpriced, right? But a lot of buyers today are savvy enough because we have the internet and they can research things. They will probably catch if you are overpricing your house. So they're not going to want it. So it's going to be on the market for a long time. And I don't know if you've ever, gone on a date with somebody and thought they were great. And then you found out that they've been single for the past 10 years and you start to wonder why, what's wrong with them that I'm not seeing. Okay. And, from the seller's perspective, a real estate transaction is a more business focused. It's more about the net profit. From the buyer's perspective, it's a lot more psychological. It's about emotion. It's how they feel about being in a house or buying a house, right? So even before they come in your front door, they already have some sort of idea of what they're getting into. So if they see on their MLS printout or on Zillow or Realtor.com that your house has been on the market for 6 months, they might think to themselves, why? There has to be a problem. Is there mold in the basement? Is there a septic issue? What's wrong with it? There must be something I'm not seeing, because they know if this was priced right in this market, it wouldn't last that long, right? So that's one downfall. Also for you as a seller, you're trying to sell as quickly as possible in most cases, and you just don't want to wait that long. Another pitfall of overpricing is that it leads to a lower net takeaway overall. And I see a lot of sellers do this. They say, okay, well, Miss Realtor, you're saying that my house is only worth $200,000, but I think it's worth more. So I want to start at $250,000. And then it doesn't sell at $250,000. A month later, they do a price reduction to $245,000. A month later, it still hasn't sold. They do a price reduction to $240,000, right? So they keep coming down, and kind of the fallacy is, well, we have the option of price reductions, so we'll just keep coming down until it sells. And you can do that, but statistically, what usually happens is you start chasing the market, right? So now every price reduction you make, longer days on the market, the buyer psychology process is starting to kick in. And by the time you get an offer, it will be lower than if you had just listed at what your realtor suggested to begin with. Because what's happening now, especially today, is if you price it right, you're going to get a lot of offers and they're going to be very, very competitive. They're going to be asking for or offering over asking price. So even if you price it at $200,000, you might get an offer for $230,000 or $225,000 with no seller's assist and no test. If you start at $250,000, people are going to shrug it off because it's overpriced. You'll do a few reductions and then they'll shrug it off because it's been on the market for a while. You'll do a few more reductions. So now you're down to $225,000 and they say, this seller looks desperate. Their house has been on the market for a while. They've done several reductions. Let's see if they take $210,000. So then they offer $210,000. By that time, it's been 6 months. You're frustrated. You want to sell. So you accept a way lower price than you would have gotten if you would have just started where your realtor suggested. Another issue that overpricing leads to is appraisal issues. So again, we talked about that in most cases, you're going to have an appraisal on your house unless the buyer is paying all cash and doesn't elect to have an appraisal done. But most times you will have an appraisal. So if the bank comes out and they see, okay, the buyer is trying to pay $250,000 for this house, but we think it's only worth $200,000. So that's all we're going to lend them, right? They are trying to protect their investment as the mortgage company. So now you have a gap of $50,000. The buyer's probably not going to have it because they're already paying thousands of dollars. They're already at their max mortgage point, right? So then what are you going to do? Are you going to come down in price and say, all right, you can have it for $200,000? At that point, why even price it high to begin with? Or are you going to let the deal fall through? Because let me tell you this, if one appraiser calls that out, the chances are another one will too. So if you have, this appraisal issue and that deal falls through, you put it back on the market at the price that you want it to be at up here when it's really only worth here, you're going to have the issue just over again. And you're just not going to sell your house that way. So we want to get the pricing from the get-go at a fair market value, okay? At a fair market value, you're going to be attracting 60% of the buyers. And really, you don't want more than that because those other 40% probably aren't serious. They're the kind that, call their realtor once every 3 months because they see a house they like, but they don't even have a pre-approval yet. They're probably not even serious enough to put in an offer. So you want to attract those 60% of buyers that are really, really serious. If you start going above, you start attracting less buyers and also not the right kind of buyers. Because think about if you price your $200,000 house at $250,000. Now the buyers that are interested in a $250,000 house that have already seen 10 other $250,000 houses today come to your house and your house doesn't look too good in comparison, right? So you don't want to be the person that prices your home so incorrectly that it sells the house down the street. We also don't want to underprice it because then you have everybody coming to look at it. They're going to think, oh, we're getting a great deal, which may be true for them, but you're still trying to, get as much profit in your pocket, really, or else why would you be selling your house? And also, just to remind you, my commission is a percentage of what your house sells for. So if I thought that we could get $250,000 for your house, I would be there with you because that's more money in my pocket too, right? But we both only make money if it sells. So it's better to price it fairly. We both make money, right? We don't have a horrible deal. We don't have something fall through. We're not on the market for over 6 months or a year and then, taking it off the market, relisting it later, because they see that too. Buyers can see that nowadays. So they say, well, what's up with this property history? Why was it listed and then unlisted and then relisted it? We don't want to do that. So the way that we figure out how to price your house is we look at other similar properties that have sold in recent history. So if I came out to price your house today, I would look at other houses that sold, let's say in the Boyertown School District, if that's where your house is, in the last 6 months. If I can't find anything within 6 months, I may go back a year, but the most recent, the better. And honestly, in this market, I might stick to 3 months just because prices are surging so much right now. So I'll look at ones similar to yours. If yours is a rancher, I'll see what the ranchers are selling for. If yours is a Cape Cod, I'll try and see what the Cape Cods are selling for. If you have a townhouse, I'll see what the townhouses are selling for. But no two houses are the same. You know, this townhouse doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the same as this townhouse. So once we narrow it down based on type of house, then we start to really get into the nitty-gritty comparisons, right? You might have central air, whereas this house that sold last week doesn't have central air. So yours will be worth a little bit more. That house that sold last week may have more square footage though, so that means their house is worth a little more, so then I would subtract some from yours. So it's pretty mathematical when you get into it, but after all is said and done, we can look at maybe 5 to 10 comparison properties and say, okay, compared to all of these, this is what yours would sell for. And we can narrow it down pretty precisely to what you should list at. So we would figure this out, this pricing strategy, in the first bubble when you're preparing to list. So this is before you put it on the market, you're just thinking about selling. Probably the first thing you're going to do is call a realtor. My information's at the end of this PowerPoint. So you call a realtor, they'll come out and do, you know, look over your house, see what they're dealing with, and then do what I was just talking about. It's called a comparative market analysis because we're comparing your house to the market and analyzing it, right? And that's a free appointment. We come out free of charge and just tell you basically what we think your house is worth and why. So we'll be working together before the public ever knows what's going on. Then you'll prepare to list. This will include signing some listing documents, deciding when you want your list period to start, when you want to start marketing it to the public. This is also the time where you're probably going to clean like crazy and organize like crazy. Maybe move some of your stuff out if you can, and get everything in tip-top shape. Once you sign those papers and decide when you want the on-market date to be, then we're officially on the market. And this is when buyers are going to start touring your house with either your agent or their agent, depending who they're working with, and if you're allowing dual agency. So they'll come in for a showing. You can also do open houses. That's when, you know, your realtor will sit for a couple hours on the weekend and just have people come in and kind of give themselves self-guided tours and hopefully share your house with more of the public. Once it's on the market, you will probably start receiving offers if you priced it right to begin with. So you'll receive some offers, and working with your realtor, you'll choose the best one. We're going to go over in a second what that means, a good offer. What does that actually mean? After you choose your offer and you sign off and you say, this is the one I want, you are officially under contract. And then after a certain amount of time, and that time period usually depends just on what kind of financing the buyer is doing. So let's say probably around a month or two. After about a month or two, you'll end up at settlement, handing over keys and getting your big chunk of change. Oops, I skipped one. So let's talk about that middle piece. After it's on the market and you start getting offers, what should you be looking for? What makes an offer a good offer? The thing that most people would think is the most important is price. And it is a big deal. Price is a huge thing. But if you have 5 offers, don't just look at the one that has the highest offer price, because that might not be the best offer. We also have to consider, are they asking for a seller's assist? Okay, because if you get an offer for $200,000 with no seller assist, that's going to net you more money than the offer for $205,000 with a 6% seller's assist. So we have to do some math to figure it out, but we want to make sure that you're getting as much possible for the sale of your house. We also want to look at, okay, how far is settlement and what are your needs as a seller, right? So you might have 5 offers, and one of them is a conventional offer and the other 4 are FHA offers, and you want to get out of there. You want this process over with. You need to move into your new house, so you need to have a 30-day settlement. So look at that too. Deposit money, I didn't mention that, so let me explain that quickly. The deposit money is what a buyer submits when they submit an agreement. It's typically a good faith effort, just kind of a show of how serious they are. Nationwide, the average is 2 to 3% of the purchase price for the deposit money that they put down. In this area, in my experience, that number tends to be a little less than that. But since we are in such a seller's market right now, it wouldn't be the craziest thing to see that 2 and 3% or maybe even a little higher. This is the money that the buyer has on the line if they walk away or change their mind, or they, kept seeing houses even when they were under contract on your house and they found one they like better. So they went out, right? So if a buyer offers you $1,000 for a deposit, that's good, right? It's a good start. But if they find one they like better, they might think, well, whatever, we'll lose our $1,000. Not that big of a deal. It hurts, but whatever. Now, if they give you a deposit of $5,000 or $6,000, that's going to hurt a little more, right? That's going to sting to walk away from a lot more than $1,000. So chances are they're more of a serious buyer and they want to show you that. So as a seller, you can, get an offer, and if you're not happy with the deposit amount, you can always ask for more. You can always counter any of the terms when you receive an offer. You're going to look at their financing options. We've talked about that already. Just make sure, watch out for those special programs. If you know your well and your septic are right next to each other and you have FHA offers, you might not want to take it, even if they're the highest priced one, because it's not going to go through, right? Why would you waste your time doing that? You want to look out for inspections. So by inspections, I mean, this is when the buyer elects if they want to have a home inspection, if they want to test for radon, if they want to test the water or the septic system. Now, some inspections will be required by the buyer's mortgage company. For example, an FHA loan would require a water test if it's well water, because they want to make sure the water's, okay for the house that they're insuring. Others are not required by the mortgage company, but buyers elect to do them anyway. So best case scenario for you is they don't want any inspections. And really, this is something we're seeing right now in today's market because it's so competitive. Buyers just are waiving all their inspections because they want to put their best foot forward. So no inspections is great. I would say I see people get a home inspection more often than not. So it really depends on who your buyer is, their comfort level. Maybe they're a contractor themselves and they would know more than a home inspector, so they don't care. They don't need to waste money on these tests. But maybe there's somebody that lived with their parents their whole life and they're only 25 and they know nothing about a home, so they want to test for all this stuff just because they're scared and it's their first time doing this. Another best possible scenario for you as a seller, if there are no other contingencies. So we already talked about an appraisal contingency. Another common one is a home sale contingency. So a lot of times, to move, people need to sell the house that they currently live in. It's common, but from your perspective, it kind of makes things more complicated because now you not only have to worry about your deal working out, but you have to worry about their deal working out too, right? So you want to make sure that the house that they're trying to sell, is that priced appropriately? Are they overpriced? We want to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to sell that house so they can buy your house. So it just kind of opens a can of worms. It works out a lot of times, but sometimes it doesn't. Or sometimes even if it does work out, it just makes a huge headache. So we want to watch out for those extra contingencies. One thing I did want to mention that you might see with an offer in today's market is what's called an escalation clause. I'm actually seeing a lot of these right now, and when I'm also representing some buyers right now, and I'm submitting a lot of these on their behalf. So an escalation clause is basically something that says, hey, I will pay $200,000 for your house, and I will pay $1,000 more than the highest offer up to a certain amount, right? So maybe they say up to $220,000. So that means if you get another offer for $210,000, this first person is going to pay $1,000 more than $210,000. So now really their offer is $211,000. So it's just a way for buyers to be more competitive and kind of beat the next person out by ratcheting up that price a little bit. So it's good and bad. It can cause an appraisal issue if it's high enough. So some sellers choose not to take it. Most sellers think, ooh, I'm going to get a higher purchase price. So I'm having my buyers do them a lot right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if you saw it. After you find the offer that is the best and right for you, then you'd be officially under contract. And in that under contract period, a few things happen, and I'm going to tell you about them. So one thing is that the appraiser is going to come out. They're going to have to schedule this. They're going to come into your home. They're going to look around. And then they're going to send the buyer an appraisal saying, yep, sure, this house appraises for the purchase price and there's no repairs. or they're going to say it doesn't appraise for purchase price, or they're going to say it appraises, but we need you to make the following repairs. We need you to repaint this window. We need you to put a railing here. We need you to do X, Y, and Z. So that's one hurdle you have to get over. Another hurdle is the inspections. So this is the buyers are paying for the inspections, by the way. It's not you, the seller, paying for them. It's the buyers. So they go out and they have their home inspector come out and they, test the water and they test the radon or whatever test that they're doing. And then they're going to respond to you, the seller, saying, hey, in our tests, we saw X, Y, and Z was wrong, and we want you to fix them before settlement. Or they'll say, we saw this was wrong, and we want you to give us a credit of $5,000 so we can fix them after settlement. Okay, so there might be some negotiations after inspections, which is why in the last slide I said best case scenario for you is absolutely no inspections, right? Because once they have inspections, if things are wrong, and there's things wrong with every house, depending on how picky the buyer is or how laid back, they might be asking you to fix stuff or give them a credit. Other things that happen during this time when you're under contract, the buyer is going to order their title insurance, their homeowner's insurance. The title insurance, by the way, is what's going to tell you what your payoffs are. So this is important for the seller because sometimes things show up on a title that really aren't there. I'm working a deal right now, and the title report showed that the seller had a second mortgage that's been paid off for years. But now the seller has to go and find documentation of that. It's kind of holding up the process. So it's not fun to deal with, but just know that a lot of times it's just seamless. They send it to the buyer, everything's a-okay, but sometimes something will come up that the seller needs to address. Back taxes they need to pay off, or a delinquent water sewer bill that their borough needs them to pay before they can sell. During this time, leave the utilities on. This happens more than you would think, or more than I thought before. So especially if you're not living in the house, you might think, okay, well, let's save money. Let's, turn off the electric, let's turn off the broiler, shut the utilities off so we can save money. But the buyer still needs to come in and have those utilities on to do their inspections, right? So the inspector is going to try to test the furnace. They can't turn the furnace on because you turned it off or because there's no oil in the tank or whatever. They can't really do their home inspection, and your buyer is not going to be happy because they're spending $400 or $500 on this inspection and they want it to be as thorough as possible. So keep those utilities on up until the day of settlement. You are responsible for everything that happens in that house up to and including the day of settlement. The last thing that'll happen during this period is the pre-settlement walkthrough. This is when the buyer comes through one last time just to make sure, the fridge that you said is staying is still there. The ugly window air conditioners that you said were leaving are actually gone, right? It's their last chance to go through, make sure there's not 2 feet of water in the basement, just to check everything over one last time before the title's transferred into their name. That usually happens the morning of settlement, sometimes the day or afternoon before. If that all goes well, then you will show up at the settlement table. Back in the day before COVID, there were several people that came to settlement: buyer, seller, their respective agents, the title clerk, the buyer's mortgage lender. Nowadays, because of COVID, we're doing things a little more socially distanced. So it might just be you, the title clerk, and the buyer. You might even be in a separate room, and then the title clerk just gives you your papers to sign and then goes to talk to the buyer. Different title companies are doing things different ways, but for the most part, it is a little different right now. So that's selling your house in a nutshell. I've seen some questions come in, and then I have some frequently asked questions that I guess asked a lot that I wanted to go over. So I'm going to look at your questions first. Okay. Somebody says, how much does it cost for me to come out and price their house? So this is when we were talking about before the listing process, before you put it on the market, when I would come to your house and talk about, hey, this is what I think your house will sell for. This is my recommendation for where we should price it and why. That's free, right? So if you talk to a realtor and they try to charge you money for that, you run away, because that is a free service. We come out and do that as part just of the services that we offer, right? And we try to do a good job and be as accurate as we can, because then we get that listing and then we do make our money at settlement. But you would not have to pay me anything for that appointment. Even if I come out and you decide you don't like me, or you're not happy with my presentation to you, or whatever, you're not ready to sell yet, not until another 3 years, even if it never goes any further than that appointment, it's still absolutely free. So there's really no skin off your back to get a realtor to come out to give you an estimated price. Somebody said, do you tell me suggestions to help me get my house ready to sell? Sure, I can. That would be something that once I come over and kind of look around and we're talking and going over the comparative market analysis on our first appointment, I can give you some tips and tricks. And what I'll tell you is, if you have a huge defect that'll really impact the sale of the house, your best bet is to fix it before putting it on the market. I'm talking big, like your heater's busted, or there's a hole in the roof and rain is getting through, or there's mold all over the basement, right? Because those things will probably impact the selling of your house. So we don't want to put it on the market already with all these known defects. Now, it is a seller's market, so sellers are getting away with a little bit more than they were years and years ago when it was a buyer's market, because right now you're not really competing against other listings. It's the buyers that are competing for your house, right? So it's the buyers are competing, the sellers are kind of sitting pretty right now. So, back in the day, you might have wanted to upgrade your flooring or put new carpet in before putting it on the market. Today, if you feel so inclined, you absolutely can, but you don't have to. I would say fix any huge material defects like mold or hole in the roof. And then after that, focus on cleaning, tidying, and painting. These are the 3 things that I think make the biggest difference, and they're the easiest and usually the cheapest, right? A fresh coat of paint makes a huge difference. I can say from personal experience, there was a house that was listed with another brokerage, wasn't selling. The seller was so frustrated, called us. I got the listing, went inside, and said, this first room, when you first walk in, looks terrible. Let's paint it and put a little table in here and a little welcome sign. It took me 2 hours to paint and put a table up, and it sold like that. And then the seller relayed later to me, somebody asked her, how was the process of selling your house? How did it go? And she said, it sold when I had the right realtor. And the right realtor in this case is one that just knows that when you walk in, you don't want to see a wall stained with fingerprints or blotches or stains. The gallon of paint was, I think, $25 in 2 hours, and it was well worth it. So just, again, psychology, right? That was the only room in the whole house that we touched. But as soon as the buyer walked in, they saw a nice, crisp room. After that, all the other rooms were older paint. They didn't look as nice, but that first impression really made a difference. So painting, clean like you've never cleaned before, and also tidying up. And this can be hard if you're still living in the house during the time that it's on the market, especially if you have kids, right? But even if before showings, you just take, the pile of mail that's on the counter and put it in a table, or you take your remotes that are on the coffee table and put it in a little storage bin or in a drawer or something. Just tidy up, make the beds, make everything as nice, neat, clean, crisp, bright as possible. So that's really where you should be putting your efforts into, rather than, redoing your cabinets or putting new doorknobs on or something. Another question was, who pays for tests? This is the buyer. The buyer pays for the actual test. They pay for it at the time of the test. The only way that you would have to put up any money for that is in a septic test. The seller is required to have it pumped. Okay, so if the buyer's getting a septic test, they need to get it pumped out. They're paying the people to actually come inspect it, but you need to order somebody to come with a big hose and pump it out. Another question, how long do the tests usually take before we get an answer from the buyer? Good question. So this is a blank on the agreement of sale. So this is something that your realtor can answer as you're looking at each of your offers. The standard on the agreement of sale, if you leave the blank is 10 days, which means the buyer has 10 days from the execution date of the agreement, the day that it's officially under contract, everybody signs. They have 10 days to complete their tests and then get you a response based on their tests, if they want you to fix something or give them a credit for something, okay? Now, when I'm representing a buyer, I tend to make that a little bit longer, like 15 days, just to give, especially now, to give them a little more time in COVID. However, if you're the seller, you probably want that to be no longer than 15 days. If you see somebody trying to say 20 or 25, that's too long. We don't need that much time. That's just more time. You know, if the deal falls through, you want to know that it's fallen through as quick as possible, right? We don't want a deal to fall through at all, but we'd rather fall through after a week under contract, and then we can get it back on the market right away than be under contract for a month before it falls through. So we want those tests to be done as quickly as possible. So I say 10 to 15 days after the execution date. So then my frequently asked questions, people are wondering, can I still sell a house during COVID-19? Absolutely, and a lot of people are. A couple of months ago in early spring, we were doing everything virtual, but it turns out that in our little corner of the country, the threat, it really isn't that great anymore. So we're doing back to in-house showings and in-person showings and in-person open houses. We are taking precautions still. Everyone that enters the house, realtors and buyers, are required to fill out a special form answering questions that they don't have the virus, have not been exposed to anybody that has the virus, aren't experiencing any symptoms, and then they sign off on that. Also, when they come into house, they have to wear a mask. You as the seller can also ask them to wear booties or gloves. You can put hand sanitizer next to the door. You can leave all your lights on so people aren't touching your switches. You can leave your doors open, like your closet doors open, so people aren't going up and touching the doorknobs. So we are being cautious, but we are back to in-person showings. Do I need to fix anything before I sell? We kind of hit on that. Clean, paint, tidy. And what if I have to find a house to buy too? So in that case that you are selling your house and you would have a contingency on that, okay, I'll sell my house to you if I find another house to buy. And you want to put that in because you don't want to sell your house and then be homeless and, you know, camping in my front yard or something like that. So I would let you though. So we want to put in, write an MLS right when we're marketing to the public. This sale is contingent on the current owner of the house, the seller, finding their own home. So we just want to disclose that up front. And then you're going to have a lot to do because you're going to be preparing for showings and maybe going over offers with your realtor at the same time that you're looking for your own house. So it can be a little stressful and a little more, you know, effort put in on by both parties, but it's definitely possible. Just disclose it, because if you don't disclose it and then you get an offer on your house, you go under contract, you can't say, well, hold on, I don't really want to sell. There's very little area for a seller to get out of a contract after they already signed. There's a couple different ways buyers can get out based on their contingencies, but as a seller, you're pretty much locked in if you haven't disclosed before that you need to find a house of your own. So I think that was all the questions I had. All right. The last thing I want to say that I didn't mention during the pricing slide was that pricing is really just based on the market, right? It's not based on how much I like your house. It's not based on how much you like your house. It's not based on how many memories you have there, which of course you have so many priceless memories there, right? But the buyers can't see that. It's really based on the economic principles of supply and demand. So if you bought a gallon of gas 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, we'll say, and you paid $5 a gallon for it, if you would try to sell that gallon of gas today at $5, nobody's going to be buying it, right? Because the gas market just isn't that strong today. They will, however, buy a gallon of gas for $2.30 a gallon, or whatever gas is at right now, right? So when we look at these market conditions, a lot of sellers I talk to say, yeah, but I paid this much for it, or yeah, but I put this much money into it, or yeah, but I think it's worth this much. And unfortunately, even though those things are important to you and to me as your realtor representing you, but a buyer coming in is just, they're not really concerned with how much you paid for your house 15 years ago. They're concerned with how much it's worth today, right? So when we price your house, that's what we have to be concerned with. And that's where we can build a relationship as a realtor client. I can help you with the pricing. I know selling a house can be a really emotional thing for some people, right? Even though it can be more businessy, but some people just really have, especially if you've been there for a while or if it was your first house, it can be an emotional thing and hard to leave. So just get a good realtor that understands all the aspects of it. But of course, you know, I'm going to direct you into the best thing that I think is possible, which is the price that I think your house will sell at. So if you are interested in getting a market analysis, call me, text me, email me, whatever. I'd be happy to come out and look at your house and just give you an idea of what I think it's worth. Even if you're not planning on selling yet, you're planning on selling down the line, you just want a general idea, right? Also follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I have a blog via Wix site. I post tips and tricks, you know, 5 things to do before listing your house for sale, or 5 little things that make a huge difference. Paint, tidy, and cleaning are on the list. I'll tell you that right now. So feel free to reach out, ask any questions, and I'd be happy to chat with you individually. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a fantastic night.